Hello and welcome to Bonfire Conversations. I'm your host Hamid Reza Nikufar, and in this episode, I'm joined by Aza Hand, the talented re-recording mixer behind the dynamic sound of the Irish film Kneecap. A powerful and energetic Irish film, the film has been well received for its bold portrayal of rebellious youth, blending humor and serious social commentary with a focus on music, politics, and identity. Critics have praised its frantic style and authentic voice, making it a standout in Irish cinema. Kneecap has been selected as Ireland's official submission for the Best International Feature category at the 2025 Oscars. Aza's work on this project brings energy and depth to the rebellious spirit of the film, and today we dive into the technical and creative challenges he faced. From blending intense concert scenes to managing the intricacies of music, dialogue, and effects, Aza shares valuable insight into the art of sound mixing. Before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to Bonfire Conversations on YouTube and all the major podcast streaming services if you're enjoying the show. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Bonfire Conversations, Aza. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast to discuss Kneecap, this fantastic Irish film, and the dynamic energy you brought to this mix. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we dive into Kneecap, could you talk us through the day-to-day duties of a re-recording mixer? What does your role typically involve on a project like this?
Yeah, my role on a project like this would involve usually beginning with the dialogue, cleaning it up, EQing it, compressing it, and reverbing it, which is what we would call pre-mixing.
Yeah.
And that would also involve matching ADR again with EQ, compression, reverb, de-essing, filtering, denoising, again, I usually would then move on to Foley pre-mixing to mix the Foley into the dialogue pre-mix that's created. In an old school method of kind of building the sound mix up from the ground. That way I like to mix into each element separately, if you know what I mean. And then I suppose we then lay the effects into that. And then usually put the music in last, but then it's a combination of having everything in there from the beginning too, in a kind of a temp way, even from the very start of the sound edit. So depending on what I'm doing, sometimes if I'm sound designing and sound editing, well, then there's mixing going on right from the beginning, even in the creation stage. So primarily mixing without doing sound design, I suppose is a little bit of a different thing.
Yeah, so we move forward more on a spotting sessions for a film like Kneecap, but let's talk about the Kneecap itself. It revolves around music and rebellious characters fighting to make their voices heard through their art. So what are some of the unique challenges you encountered when mixing the sound for this film?
Well, unique challenges, I think, was to really portray the band in a really realistic way, capture that raw energy that's very, very current at the moment. I, in fact, took time off in the middle of the mix to go to see them live in a famous theatre here in Dublin called the Olympia Theatre.
Yeah.
And was really pleasantly surprised because, in fact, the live gigs is something special because there's a huge amount of audience interaction. It's not really like watching a traditional concert where the artist might just come on and perform their songs and leave. So it's really, really interactive, and there's even mosh pits, all sorts of characters there. From all kind of ages and lots of girls and boys and older people as well, and people. There was lots of rockers there, which I was amazed about. People in tracksuits, people with long hair and beards, all sorts of people. So I thought that was cool, and people from all different countries too, not just Irish people. So I think they're very kind of into that kind of inclusivity, it seems, which I like. And it was a great vibe. So the unique challenges when it comes to mixing a movie like this, really wanted to make sure that the concerts, especially in the movie, were really realistic, bombastic, dynamic, not ear piercing. I hope in any kind of a way. So that involves a lot of work in terms of EQ and compression and reverbing and stuff to get that right, and to keep the energy up, and also be able to dip out of that kind of massive energy in order to be able to hear the dialogue as well. So it's a real dance, and it's very enjoyable though to mix a film like this, because there was a huge amount of on-the-fly creativity when it came to music editing, even, and for instance, the director would ask me, "What about this, Aza? I think this needs something to propel us into the," and I would say things like, "Oh, well, what about if we just take some of that piece of music from earlier on, and we'll reverse it and stick it through a load of reverb or something. We'll see what that's like," and this kind of thing, and that was fine by him. He just kind of sat back and let me do my thing, and I think everybody was really enjoying the film and the mix as well, because when they came into the room, it was big and loud. Yeah, it was very loud, but it was really enjoyable, and so I think that was the biggest challenge, just to try to really make sure that the movie moved seamlessly from drama and comedy into these music moments, and that we weren't jarred out of it, and that we felt like we're always in that Kneecap world, like that real world. Well, it's not a real world, is it? It's fictitious to a certain extent, but then it is real too, because it's happening right now. They're very current. So,
it's relatively new, and you talked about the concert, and as we go forward, there are these live performances, say, from Kneecap. But at the end, there's this huge event. So, were you like aiming for that particular scene, like keeping the dynamic range, shooting for that scene, like starting slower and going louder and louder and more chaotic towards the end of the film?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I absolutely had that in mind, and I remember watching Commitments many times. I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen The Commitments? It's an Irish film.
Haven't. No.
It's an old film from the 90s about a band beginning in Ireland. They're not a real band, but it was really great. A lot of soul music, like Otis Redding and stuff like that. And I loved the mix of the movie, because when they start out and they're kind of practicing at the beginning, it doesn't sound that good, but at the end it sounded brilliant. Like it really sounds like a proper, amazing soul band. And so yeah, look, to a certain extent I did, but like at the same time I still needed to make them sound good too from the beginning. So there's just I think the cinema system affords a huge dynamic range in mixing, and it really is great to hear those kind of hip hop beats and bass lines pop off in the cinema speakers, because they can really take it. They're kind of like a PA for a live band, but a lot more sophisticated and better sounding than that.
Yeah.
That's what speakers are,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. We kind of touched about this, but I'm curious about the spotting sessions for a film like Kneecap. Could you share how these sessions typically unfold? How do you collaborate with the sound department and the director to align the sound with the film's vision?
Yeah, the spotting session would normally take place with everybody involved, like the dialogue editor, the sound designer, and the mixer.
Yeah.
And usually the picture editor and the director. It was kind of led by the supervising sound editor, Brendan Rehel. Louise Burton, the set dialogue editor and ADR editor and supervisor, she was also there. And the conversation, it just evolved kind of very fluidly about how it would be approached, and the director was still hashing out ideas about scrawling words across the screen, and I remember chiming in about how I thought that was an amazing idea, how it really felt like the words were being spilt out from the notebook, which is the genesis of the whole thing from the beginning. It also gives us an opportunity to read the words in Irish. That's educational for people too. And it was a really kind of cool stylistic thing. And he was unsure about that. He was getting notes. Oh, some people didn't like it, and et cetera, et cetera. I remember telling him I loved it. And we just went through the movie kind of, you know, from the beginning to the end, and talked about it. But really, you know, a movie like this, as you can well see, it's not really a big sound design movie. As in this, there's a lot of Brendan did a fantastic job with the sound effects and the sound design. But what I mean to say is, it isn't a psychological horror. It's not a thriller. It's you know, it's about Kneecap. So the biggest thing I guess we talked about was just how we were going to approach recording the different songs and all the rest, etc., etc. You know, like all of the songs were re-recorded. All of the vocals were re-recorded in the studio, and sometimes we didn't use those re-recorded vocals, but a lot of the time we did. Like the big concert at the end, that's all re-recorded in the studio. All the vocals. So that's a full fabrication, if you will, which I love that, because I love the fabrication, if you will, because not that I like that it's not real, but the idea that you can make it real from all of these elements that are coming from different places, and that maybe it could come across as seamless. I like that.
Yeah, and there's a sense of reality to it when you watch it. Like, oh, I can kind of understand that this is being performed in this particular room instead of recorded in some years ago in the studio. Yeah. So, for this, did you have any specific films in mind for reference when you were mixing Kneecap? Like, were there any particular inspirations that influenced your approach?
I would say that the Commitments was one for sure. A famous Irish movie, and then of course 8 Mile. And Straight Outta Compton. I mean, I've definitely had those films in mind, but you know, at the same time, I was always going to do it my own way. So you know, it's Kneecap style with my style of mixing, and I'm big into my hip hop and my reggae and my electronic music. I also love Miles Davis and, you know, Herbie Hancock and funk and soul and everything. But so I have a wide ranging taste, but I certainly am afraid of something sounding big and bombastic, and I know what it's like to be at a big sound system concert and what that feels like and what it sounds like. I also did a lot of live sound in my ears before getting into film, where I did mixed live concerts and everything as well, bands, DJs, all sorts. So I know what it sounds like to be there, and I really love that you can do that in a film mix. I love when not just in music films. Like another film which I thought sounded absolutely brilliant was The Boxer by Jim Sheridan. It's not even probably not his most well-known film, but again, it's just that realistic sense of the crowd and the whole boxing ring and everything that goes on around it. It's just so real, you know. Yeah. So I tried my best to do that, to give that feeling.
Yeah, it has its the soul of its own, this movie. And let's get a bit more technical. When you're dealing with scenes where the music, sound effects, and dialogues are all competing for attention, how do you go about solving those moments? What's your process for achieving balance? I mean, let's talk about it very technical, because I'm a composer and sound designer myself. I really and I do mix video games especially, and these are the moments that are really tricky. Like, how do I make the focus on the dialogues? How do I keep the energy of the music here, or the sound effects is audible or not? You know, there's this warfare between all these departments. How do you approach and solve these issues before even beginning?
Well, it's hard to solve it before beginning, but certainly if you are mixing a film or a game or with dialogue, music, effects, and Foley, I think a very important way to begin would be to have a very good speaker system that's capable of a high dynamic range, and that can reproduce all of the frequencies very easily. So and I think using small speakers is tough to do that.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say that checking things on small speakers is not necessary, but I think, in my opinion, it is a little tough to do that with. So I think a bigger speaker would help. And I think the way I would approach it is that the dialogue, I think, has to be very full-bodied and not too affected, because if that can sound big, that can be the spine of the mix,
Yeah.
in which everything else will sit around. Because if you make the dialogue sound thin, then everything else is going to have to try to fit around that. So
Yeah.
you're already on the back foot now with thin dialogue.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think that, you know, it's you need to almost sometimes trick the brain. You know, you start to tease music down at a certain point, or maybe tease it back up again for a second, and then go back a bit down again. Stuff like that. Try to get the music into the place it needs to be by the time the dialogue begins again. And another trick is, for sure, is to ride the EQ of the music. So take out some higher frequencies and stuff like that when you've got dialogue. But I certainly think, and I think I remember reading Paul Massey, who's a very famous mixer who did like Gladiator and all sorts of really cool films.
Yeah,
he spoke about the dialogue thing, about how as soon as, all depending on the sound of the dialogue, everything else will sound the way it's going to sound, depending on how that sounds. That makes total sense, actually.
Yeah.
And then I think as well, if we know what the speaker's capable of, well, then you know what you could be capable of with the sound.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. So, speaking of, tell me about some of your favorite plugins when mixing. Do you have any favorites that you rely on regularly?
I now have resorted to using one plugin for all of my channel strip, which is called the Harrison MPC.
Oh, yeah.
Strip, which is a really expensive plugin that I bought. But I think it's great. It's not to say that, like, there's loads of other great plugins out there, like the Oxford. I think they're great.
Yeah.
The de-esser and the filters and the EQs, and like, they're excellent. Like, again, these are tools that are modeled on high-end digital consoles.
Yeah.
And those high-end digital consoles were developed by people who spent years developing digital technology. And they all worked at like 40-bit floating point and everything, like Neve DFC and Sony Oxford and everything. You know, it's really high-end stuff.
Yeah.
These are consoles that came from the analog era, where people were working with high-end analog sound and high-end analog tape reproduction. And those digital consoles needed to be as good as. So I believe that the plugins that are modeled on those, or at least made by those people, have a good chance of being better. Having said that, to my ear, a lot of the plugins sound the same, and I think we've plateaued now in digital.
Yeah.
I don't know that digital's ever going to sound any better than it already does. I think we've plateaued, and we started to go back now. And or vinyl, and I've even bought a reel-to-reel and got it restored.
Wow.
Because I know why. It's not that I want to start editing tape or anything like that, but I know that I'm in a digital world that's been eroded so badly, especially, you know, not necessarily in what we do, because we're working at 24-bit and 48 kilohertz, but, you know, the MP3s and everything else and Spotify and all the rest, like, it's very eroded. And the purity of that analog tape sound is absolutely beautiful. Like, it's unbelievable. It's a Studer Revox A77 from 1974. It sounds amazing. And it sounds louder, clearer, nicer than my Pro Tools.
Yeah.
But obviously, we're still gonna use Pro Tools, because we're living in the best of both worlds now, aren't we? Because you can have you can record the tape into Pro Tools and edit it in seconds. And so the reason the Harrison MPC channel strip, I like it because it has the filtering, the multi-band parametric equalizer, de-esser, compressor, denoiser, and an automatable routing chain, all in the one window. And what that enables you to do is properly Swiss Army knife down on the dialogue.
Yeah.
And everything else, music, whatever it needs to be. But the main work when it comes to EQing and all that stuff that I just mentioned is dialogue in film, and music. And the ability to be able to tweak all the different processes in the same window at the same time, and see and listen to how they interact with each other at the same time, enables you to properly control the dialogue, like a proper console, and that's why I love it. And then I use Altiverb. So Altiverb on that, and then I use Halo Upmix. I think that's brilliant from New Gen.
Yeah.
Especially for Atmos, because that can turn stereo tracks into Atmos tracks, you know, the kind of way, like 7.1.4 from stereo into all different ways, and it sounds lovely. I have Atmos in my studio here, and I love it. I use it for everything. I record into the renderer, into the software render for everything now, even if it isn't in Atmos. So, but I am going to be doing an Atmos show coming up now in January, which is going to be cool for Netflix. But the Altiverb, the Halo Upmix, the New Gen ISL True Peak limiter, that's great.
Yeah.
And Halo, True Peak, Altiverb. Honestly, I think you can mix a whole movie with just those. I just don't see it. Maybe you could get a delay, that could, like an echo, but then Altiverb can do echo, you know?
Yeah.
And then you can achieve echo in a lot of different ways as well. I find editing and repeating and then affecting sounds with audio suites a very effective way of doing echo in movies, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so because you can really exactly control what's happening with the repeats in perfectly, rather than relying on an output of a wet live plugin. And then I also have as well, I also have the TC Electronic 6000, the hardware reverb here, and the Lexicon 480L. And I use those too. I re-record those for dialogue whenever I can. And honestly, I did it for Kneecap. And again, those reverbs are so good and even so much better than Altiverb that they bolstered up the signal. Like, I can't tell you, because with Altiverb, you can apply a certain amount of wet verb. And I think if you go a little bit too much with it, it's just really obvious and it doesn't sound good. And the director is just going to say it's too much reverb. And with those old school hardware units, I think they sound like you can apply like twice as much.
Yeah.
And that in itself bolsters that signal again, that dialogue, making it bigger and more cinematic and bigger on the screen and everything. And so again, you're just off to a flying start. And those reverbs are still used. Paul Massey, who mixed Gladiator 2 and everything in the brand new Warner Brothers suite in London, I went to meet him there, and they had two enormous Neve DFC consoles with an Avid S6 built into it. Brand new Neve DFC 3D Atmos consoles, which are fully digital consoles. They don't control Pro Tools. And Avid S6 is built in, and it was modular. You could choose whatever you wanted. And then like two or three of those Lexicon 480Ls, which are from 1986, I believe, 1988.
Wow.
And they have all brand new of those because, Paul Massey, he come in with his Harrison outboard console that he ships over with him and re-records the dialogue through a Harrison console that he plugs into the Neve DFC and dials up reverbs live and probably just takes down the settings, and doesn't even probably need to take down the settings. You just dial it in. And out of those kind of boxes, if you're talking about like Gladiator 2, for example, he's going to be dialing in Colosseum type echoes and stuff with that Lexicon.
Wow. Yeah.
That are going to be sounding way better than any plugin, I guarantee you. Because you can argue that the cows come home with people, because you can only ever say in my opinion, can't you? Because it is only my opinion, but I really do believe that.
Yeah, and this is amazing how advanced we are, and this is weird that how differently advanced we are going to be with the introduction of AI being used in the mix and the music production. So, what do you think about the future of AI in the mixing movies, for example?
Yeah, I'm really unsure about it because, I think at the moment the tools are not great. Like I've heard some AI denoising, and it really doesn't do very nice things to the dialogue at all.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with like noise that's really unreasonable, and you just can't use the pieces, you're talking about almost restoring it. Maybe that AI could work in that instance.
Yeah.
And then you got ideas like maybe you could be in a situation where someone would just get AI to generate the sound design or the sound effects for the whole film. But the artists that I work with, the directors, and we're not, I don't think we're there yet. Maybe in the next generation it could happen, but I don't believe that you're going to end up being like one guy in an office prompting the film. And I don't believe that's what humans want from film or art. They want the human interaction and the emotional response that humans can give to any kind of piece of art. Or sorry, the emotional response that a piece of art can evoke in anyone, you know, and or invoke is the word. I'm not sure, but it's tough to see how skipping out the artists in that kind of a way will be pleasing to anybody really, other than the money makers. But again, back to that kind of the age old battle between the money making and the art, and like the money makers still need the artists to make money. So it's just maybe the AI will eat itself and it'll just like come out with like a black screen with a white dot in the middle in the end. I won't be able to do anything else. I don't know. I think it's just crazy. I think it's crazy. And yeah, I mean, I read an amazing quote. It's too long, but yeah, it talks about digitalization has already disassociated human experience. It's been a long, corrosive process. While the novelty of hard-edge pixels and mechanical sound bites have pushed us into sensory overload, it has reduced human effective connection overall. It has got to the point where the digital artificial snow starts to burn our eyes and ears. The breathing space is filtered out. It is hard to notice because it's happened so gradually. Notice the move back towards LPs for the more discerning music lover. You can still hear the dirt and the breath, which the creativity and aesthetics are actually nested into. I have to get the guy who wrote this because I just think that's amazing and so true.
Exactly. Yeah, those imperfections actually make it, say, perfect. Yeah. And I think as long as it's improvement, not replacement, it's a great tool actually. But thinking about it that, okay, make the music for this or design the sound for this, I don't think, I mean, this is pretty advanced, but I don't think it's going to have the soul. And it's not something that we could define. I mean, the audience is going to notice it. Like, yeah, it looks perfect, exactly. But it doesn't have that. Yeah. It
looks weird at the moment.
Yeah.
And it sounds really strange.
Yeah.
So I really kind of believe sometimes as well that the marketing campaigners of the capitalist world we live in have latched onto the AI buzzword now as a new thing to sell.
Exactly.
We've already had AI and things that analyze in advance, and we have denoisers that are already AI, don't we? I mean, that learn and
exactly.
We've already reduced the sound process over the last 30 years to kind of one person in a room when it was like 20, 30 people with machines full of tape and massive consoles and a huge operation just to edit and mix one film would take absolutely ages and would take a lot of people and a lot of resources. And now we can do it with a computer. So we've come a huge long way. I mean, and sometimes I feel that the AI and the fear of AI again is that another headline to another fear-inducing headline for us artists to sell. The fear sells, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. The same thing, like the sample libraries, for example. I mean, with one finger, I'm playing the whole orchestra recorded in Air Studio, for example.
Yeah.
And before that, like 20 years or 30 years ago, you have to go there and hire people to play that music. But we just want the best quality. But that thing that you said, exactly, yeah, there's a new kind of buzz around this. They're making money, I guess.
they're making money, yeah, and they've got massive investment, and this is the new thing, and it's going to take over, and and you wonder, you know, Let's hope not.
Yeah.
But,
Exactly.
yeah, but I think yeah, yeah, it's just fascinating though, isn't it? The idea that the thing, like, we hope that robots and artificial intelligence would help us with mundane stuff, not take our artistic jobs away from us, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our creativity.
Great. Yeah. I hope that things are a little positive in the future. So on that positive note, let's end this. So thank you so much, Aza. Kneecap is bombastic and an energetic thing, man. A lot of that energy is thanks to your beautiful mix. Congratulations to everyone involved, and I can't wait to see you take the lead on more impactful projects like this. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks so much. And yeah, hope to speak to you again sometime. Thanks a million.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day, sir. Goodbye.
Bye now.